back to my house on South Hill.
You cannot move until your kids are 18.
All right, well,
I get home at
is everybody ready? We're on the air, by the way. Bill, start us up.
Okay, you're good.
Are you gonna sit down there, or are you leaving? All right,
Bye,
we'll
Zach.
see if Mr. James. Okay, we're gonna start the city council work session. This is work session agenda for the Monday, March 9th, 2020, 4:30. Thomas J. Smith, Council Chambers, City Hall. First up on the proposed agenda for March 16th is the public hearing consideration for the fiscal year of 2020, 2021 budget. Jim or Stephanie? Stephanie?
Or both.
All right, both tag team.
So the public hearing was published in the paper last week. It's the first page that's in that packet, just that recap of what the budget rate's going to be, and then also the amount of property taxes it's going to levy. Also included in the packet is the full detailed state budget form that we fill out, and that's what we submit to the state of Iowa. So if anybody has any questions, basically, all the numbers that you were presented with the month of January is all compiled into this one document. You can see it's broken down by different functions. Under the expenditures, where we talked public safety, that's police and fire. But that's why this is required by law that we break it down like this in the budget. So that's why it's presented. Next week at the public hearing, I'll have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm just wrapping that up, and it will be posted on the internet or on our website tomorrow, probably by the end of the day at the latest. Right now, Eric, do you mind, will you pull up the website real quick? Just so you could see where, right now, we're required to have this form out there, which it is, so it will be kind of close to that. And if you can't, that's fine, we could do it later. But I know Leon last year had requested that the PowerPoint be available to view before the public hearing, which makes sense, because I know the state form is, a little bit hard to follow. So if you scroll down, so right there, the notice, and click on that. So this spotlight section, it will say, proposed FY21 budget PowerPoint, and then you'll be able to click on it and you'll be able to look at my slides. And again, I'll be going over them in detail if you have any questions next week. So anything to add, Jim? Or?
No, just a reminder, the budget does maintain in this, the front sheet of the budget packet has tax levies. It's maintaining the same exact levy that we had for the current year. We're able to maintain our existing level of services with one thing, we did change a position from a part-time to a full-time in the police department evidence tech position. But we're able to do that without, again, raising property taxes or the levy amount.
Good. Any questions, council? Stephanie or Jim?
One of the things that was mentioned, and I know that there's a request to see the CIP. If you can go under, Eric, if you want to go to OpenGov.
Which is on that first page too.
It's at the bottom. If you go to again, you can look through all of our numbers there. You can also look under filters. If you go back up to, and it'll show your reports. And if you do the proposed CIP right below it, that's the current, you clicked on the existing, the one that we approved this last year that we're working off. This is the proposed one that's part of the budget that we're going to be approving this next week. So folks can look through that proposed CIP fiscal year 21 through 25 and see the list of projects and how each of them are funded. And again, that matches what we had during the budget meetings that were held in January.
Okay. Any questions, anybody? I think we got that one down. Next one up is resolution approving the transfer of the funds.
So this is a resolution that's required by the state too. This came into effect, I think, like a year and a half ago. So basically, these are all the transfers that we're going to do for fiscal '21. I've decided to do it at the same time we're approving the budget because all these transfers are in the budget. Basically, it's just to be more transparent. You can see in Exhibit A, it goes through, and it shows you exactly the fund that's initiating the transfer and then where it's going to and the amount. So anytime during fiscal year '21, we do transfers twice a year. We do them in December and then January. But anytime I would have to do a
December
transfer
and
that is
June.
over these amount, I would need to come back to council and get it approved. So these are up to amounts. Some of them aren't exact. Some of them are exact. This is all that we will transfer in fiscal year '21.
Okay.
So, any questions?
I didn't have any looking at it. Anybody? Jim, do you have anything to add on that?
No, but this one that, as we go through the year, as we do transfers that weren't part of the original budget, we bring other additional resolutions to approve those transfers. We haven't
Right.
had to do those significant amount in the past, but now with the new legislation that was put in place, we need to make sure that we have a resolution approving any of those transfers.
Most of those in the past have been associated with projects, right? That'll probably be the trend of moving forward. You don't see that changing, right?
No,
And
it's,
maybe with the exception of the golf course of the Recoplex.
if you have a balance that you need to somehow get evened out, we'll see that occur. And I can't remember, Stephanie, as we do transfers from one capital project to another, do you need to do a budget resolution for that or not?
Well, I have an up to amount in here, but no, if it's in the same funds, we don't necessarily need to do a transfer.
But we'll have a deficit,
Or-
say, in a given capital project for a street project, and if we have to transfer from road use tax to cover to get it to zero out, we'll get a resolution approving that. If we have a balance between two street projects, Agency Street, Agency West, East and West, for example, one of those has a deficit and one of them has a cash balance, we can zero those out without doing a resolution.
Right.
They were both authorized through the same funding source, so we'll be able to balance those out without doing this, but.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, number 3 is public hearing for consideration of plans and specifications for the 2020 Central Avenue HMA resurfacing project. Yes.
If you want to put that other traffic control map up, that's a better map than what that one was. So the public hearing in front of you is to oversee the plans and specifications for the Central Street HMA project, which will go from Harrison, or rather from north to south, from Angular south to Harrison, and will be a full-depth HMA replacement. So we'll go in and mill off the asphalt surface, and then in places have to patch. I thought the traffic control was kind of an important one to talk about, just because our planned process now is to have segments that we shut down completely and let the contractor have access to. This is different than some of the other HMA projects like Mount Pleasant Street, where we allowed access because it was had in thirds. Because there are so many parallel roadways to use and for function of the contractor to try and get a good price, we allowed to be broke down kind of in two segments. The estimate for this project, the most recent iteration, is $821,194. This is a little bit different than the previous conversation during the 5-year road plan. After Jesse was looking at it, in the North Hill work in residential areas, we're not using a high traffic binding material. Since Central is a much heavier used road, we're going to try and specify a binding material similar to what we used on Mount Pleasant Street, and that comes with a little bit more cost, about $1.50 per quantity of it. So it was about a $730,000 project in the 5-year road plan. This is $821,000. Granted, that's an estimate. Because we have W.L. Miller in the area doing work just in the North Hill part, I think we'll probably see some pretty good competitive bids. So until the bidding happens and higher or lower, I would wait to offer any sort of recommendation on what you do. But I think the binding material to go with a little higher traffic or a little heavier loading makes a lot of sense, just because Central sees a fair amount of traffic on it. I don't know the numbers. I think it's probably in the 3,000 to 4,000 bracket.
Nick, will the additional funds come out of road use tax?
And this is general obligation monies.
So
it's
do we
the,
have those funds available to cover it? in
we
the
have
event
some
that our
fund
minimum bid
balance
is-
sitting in there.
The only question I have is, this project's gonna cut off access for a lot of people on Central Street, between, Spruce and South, and on the front of their property. We're also gonna be tearing up their alleys for the SSO work. Are we gonna come to a point where we have both their alley and their frontage road torn up and limiting them access? Given the timeline?
We shouldn't. We don't go east or west of 9th Street too much for SSO work.
Well,
We're
but I
in the-
know like the 1000 block of South Central, we've got work in that alley. We're gonna be ripping those alleys out this summer, aren't we? With the
It'll
main
probably
lane
be
and
later.
new
I mean,
sewer line?
the CSO work is still got quite a bit of work left
Okay.
to go, and I don't think we'll be affecting it. This is
Okay.
a relatively quick project. Asphalt is by far much quicker than concrete work, so
Yep, I just wanted to make sure we weren't gonna be cutting people's access off to their homes completely.
I'll have to double check and make sure that there isn't any construction perimeter restrictions that
Okay.
they'll have. I don't think so, off the top of my head, thinking about it. I don't think we go any further west than Madison or 9th,
Okay.
so we shouldn't be affecting it.
So when you say do it in two segments, you got any idea how long each of those segments
Yeah,
are
so
gonna last?
we would go from Angular to South, and I would say it would probably be a month and a half
Okay.
per. I think it's a 3 or 4 month process. And Jesse probably outlined that in the specifications on the
Okay.
number of working days. We bid the project out with a number of working days tied to it.
Okay.
So,
Thanks, Nick.
And this
on
won't
that.
start till May?
well, depends on when they make it, who gets the bid and who's making the asphalt. So asphalt traditionally has started production around April 15th, give or take. We have Norris in town in place of what Cessford is, and then the WL Miller is doing the work in North Hill area. And I could see them starting being production here in the next couple weeks, once they know that their freezing points aren't gonna happen. And the biggest contingency is when they're gonna be able to get oil for their own production. So, if that's the case, I could see them starting some work once the bid has been let and the contract's been approved. So I would say mid-April to early May, you could start seeing work.
Thanks, Nick.
Anybody else have any questions for Nick? No? All right. Number 4 is resolution directing the sale of bonds and improving the BPA 2020 A and B. Jim?
This would be a follow-up to several other discussions we've had over the last few weeks. Last week, the last council meeting was, we approved the general obligation, corporate purpose, and refunding loan agreements not to exceed $16 million. It was divided up into 3 series, 2020 A, B, and C. 2020C was for new money, the projects that are actually happening this calendar year. Series 2020A and 2020B are refinancing of previous bonds. 2020A is a $5.4 million, $5,440,000 issue. Refinances Series 2013C, 2014A, 2015A, older bonds. We're refinancing for savings. Projected savings had been $247,000. Based off of estimates from a month or two ago, my guess is, I have a suspicion that the savings will probably be a little bit north of that, given the current rate environment. The 2020B is a $4,160,000 refinancing amount, and it's, the two series that it's refinancing are from 2013. It had a projected savings of about 92,000. These are being done separately from the new money. We're doing them as two separate pieces to keep from some level of confusion from the bond market as we take these out to sale. So the two resolutions here, one is the first is authorizing us to go for the sale of the new bonds. The second one is authorizing recalling the existing bonds. We have to call them in order to refinance them. So there's two steps that are involved in this process. We are part of going out for the sale of the bonds or the refinancing is having a bond rating done. We got to go through that process with Standard & Poor's over the last couple of weeks. They reviewed our financial condition. They've affirmed our A+ rating. A+ sounds like it should be a great rating, and it is a good rating. You need to be in the A's, you don't want to be in the B's. But if you were to look among the top communities and the larger communities in the state, the 24 towns that are above the 20,000 population, that's the second lowest rating of any of those communities out there. There's one community that has a rating lower than us, and that's the ones that I had gone out and looked up. There were about a dozen of those that had an existing rating that was easily findable. So we're in a good position. We're maintaining our existing financial condition, but it is one of the things that Standard & Poor's looks at us as a community is a challenged community. Our financials are in good shape. They noted that getting to the 15% cash balance was something that they gave us a bump up in that notation this year. But they have two major concerns, one of them being our elevated debt amount, though they noted that it is paid off rapidly. And the second, just the economic conditions that we face here. Our overall property valuations are low, our overall average income levels are lower than state and national averages. And they note those as headwinds that are environmental to us that we just have to deal with and have an impact on our bond rating. I know that's just a side bonus benefit. You didn't want to hear all of that, but it is part of the environment for what we sell into.
All right, any questions, anybody? Does that take care of 4 and 5 then, basically,
Yep.
Jim? Okay. Moving on to the proposed consent agenda. The first up is resolution approving nuisance abatements for various properties. Anything we should know there, Eric? No? Number 2 is resolution approving fees for rental housing inspections. Eric?
So we're, last increased fees in 2017, looking at our fees, we tried to look at comparables throughout the state as well as our 6 primary comparables. We're a little under on most of those, from 25 cents to 70 cents per unit per month. It's tough to compare to other communities in some sense because everyone does things a little differently. We do a 5-year inspection cycle for single family and duplexes, and then a 3-year for triplexes and above. That kind of skews our rates a little bit once you hit that cutoff. Some do annual inspection fees, some do 3 years. Some have annual registration fees or landlord registration fees. So we tried to do the best we could to compare, but we are, as I said, about 25 cents to 70 cents under per unit per month that we looked at for comparable communities. So we were looking to increase our fees to 150 per structure plus 50 per unit. That would get us almost in line, not quite fully covering one individual, not just their salary costs, but if you divide our inspection budget by 5, we'd be still under that 1/5 employee covering that cost, because we still have building inspectors, our project coordinator, even myself, that deal with this, not as regularly as the rental inspectors, but on a whole, we all kind of work together on that. So looking at it, trying to cover our costs for just one employee out of the department, and that would increase our fee amount that we collect. If was it 25,000 approximately, based on our number of rentals. So looking to go to 150 per structure plus 50 per unit, with subsequent increases in reinspection and no-show fees, and trip fees. So per unit, that would increase approximately, for single family, not quite about $1 increase per month. For duplex, about 60 cents, for a sixplex, since we're on those 3 and 5 year schedules, about 60 cents as well per month increase. So that, looking at where we're at, and then covering our cost allows us to hopefully keep our seasonal nuisance inspector, as well as we have increased cost. This is what we're recommending to go to.
Okay. Any questions, anybody? Thoughts or concerns?
I mean, my primary concern is I don't see the rates as being too far out of whack with where the rest of the state is right now, not enough to adjust it. And I've already heard complaints. Granted, I have rental property, so that I don't know how I'm going to approach this personally, but I have heard complaints that we're already struggling to get everybody to register their properties as rental properties. By increasing the fees, you're just going to continue to incentivize that behavior. So that was a primary concern. Again, I don't think it's too far out of whack with where it is now, so I don't see the adjustment as being necessary, but that's where I'm at.
All right. Anybody else? So what's everybody feeling on the feel that they're okay? Got where Matt's at on it?
What did your question, are you asking if everyone's in agreement with Matt or going along
Well,
with
I'm
the?
asking if everybody's, should have clarified, thanks, Jim. I was wondering if everybody's in agreement with the proposed increase, or if we needed to have more discussion on it.
I think Eric spelled it out pretty
Okay,
well.
all right. Okay then, moving on. Number 3 is a resolution approving corrective legal description for the sale of a vacated portion of the former alley right-of-way located north of the property at 2408, 2410 Flint Hills Drive, City of Burlington.
This is a alley portion that we sold back in December 2019, the highlighted portion up here. In the legal description, when went through the county process, realized there's a typo. One of the lots said lot 213 instead of 215. So this just corrects the legal description to reference that lot 215. I think this lot over here was 213, but it meant to reference the lot 215 for the legal description. So they require a corrective resolution to have that actually recorded.
Okay, obviously no questions there. Number 4, resolution awarding contract for the 2019 Lewis Street Sewer Repair Project. Nick?
This resolution would award bid to Four Seasons Excavating for the Lewis Street repair project. These plans and specifications have had to alter due to some other issues that were found. The plans and specs came through for a public hearing here several months ago, back in November, I think. Because of the changes and the weather conditions to investigate it, that's the reason for the delay. Jesse's estimate on the project is $222,250. So Four Seasons at $174,988 comes a fair amount underneath that. Now there are things that once you open up the earth that can happen from change orders and quantity adjustments on the amount of pipe that they're going to have to replace. This project is going to be funded through our miscellaneous sewer rehab project. Or the mainline repair. This is also the same funding that paid for the hole in our Hawkeye storm sewer. So it has been unfortunately, it's been something that we've had to use for the type moments, the collapses, the breaks. We'd like to be able to use this money in the future for some lining type projects. We just can't seem to get away from some of our constant issues on our old system. But I think that the price we got for this project is reasonable. So I would recommend awarding.
Is this the one where it's kind of down in the hole, like they have to?
Yeah, it's a deep dig. I think it's 25 foot deep.
And it's kind of
we
off
don't
the
have-
roadway.
Yeah, it's just off Main Street to the west there, behind,
you
it's
have
kind of in the
to,
people's yards.
yeah, I was
We're
gonna
gonna
say,
be, we're gonna be excavating the one guy's yard up quite a bit to try and
And
access
you've
the
spoken
pipe.
to him, the owner?
Yeah, we've discussed, temporary construction easements.
Okay, and they're okay with it?
They would like the issue fixed, I guess, more
Okay.
so. I don't think they're pleased with having to have their yard all ripped up, but, wanna make sure that there's a sinkhole kinda in the area, and that's how it was originally spotted,
Okay.
so.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions, anybody? Jim,
No.
do you have anything to add?
The funding source he's talking about, we essentially take some money, designate some money out of the sewer fund and put it into a capital project fund to cover these things that come up. When we had the repair just to the east of Hy-Vee,
Oh,
sewer
thank you.
collapse there, that paid for that there. We try to set aside about 300,000 a year. When the hole happened down by the auditorium, we had to go quite a bit above that $300,000 figure that we took out of. But again, if we were to avoid these issues, we'd like to use that on a proactive rather than a reactive basis, but this is what we've set those funds aside for.
Have we had any discussions lately with our extension for the DNR?
We are drafting the letter to Iowa DNR legal. The DNR permitting folks are A-OK with what we have presented to them up to this point. Now it is up to the point of getting our legal documentation in place, and get the consent order, rewritten, so to
Okay.
speak.
Okay.
It's a time-consuming process, and again, making it work from the legal side, I think, is probably the biggest hurdle here. And right now, as we're trying to get that letter drafted, I think Dustin from Nymaster, a legal firm up in Des Moines, what he's trying to coordinate is how do you get the integrated management plan approval process done in conjunction with an alteration to the CSO order, consent order that we have.
And
So
hit,
he's-
and hit the language spots that the
That
Iowa
they'll-
DNR is gonna want us to hit. So we're gonna have to talk about, not only our NDPMS, I can't spit it out.
NPDES.
Yeah, he knew what I was trying to say, permit, along with, nutrient reduction is part of that permit, but I think it may be called out actually in our consent order.
No,
No?
it's in the NPDES permit, but the larger part there is, as we work through all the different things that we're trying to get done, DNR has one of their priority issues is nutrient reduction. And even though it's not part of the consent order, it's one that they want to make sure that we don't put off as we try to deal with other things. So making sure that we address it appropriately in a way that keeps everybody happy is, I think there's some wordcraft going on in how you present things.
Okay.
So we will update you once we have, that consent order kind of ready for your approval on what we think is a fair, and I guess feasible. I don't know if you could say that.
Fair, you mean?
Fair.
Yeah. Well, fair to us, anyway. All right. Thanks, Nick. Let's see. Next up is resolution approving Title IV, non-discrimination assurances and, is that 6? Title VI, non-discrimination assurances and Title VI, non-discrimination agreement. Who's up for that one?
So these were requirements we applied for and received Transportation Alternative Program funding, TAP funding for a trail on West Avenue. As part of that process, they stated Title VI documents must be updated every 5 years or whenever there's a change in mayor. So they were last updated in January of 2019, but with the new mayor, they are required to be updated with new mayor's signature and submitted in order to qualify for those federal funds.
Okay. Number 6, resolution authorizing the city of Burlington to hold the Great River Bridge Race.
Yay.
Last year, the DOT required for the first time that we submit an application that the council has approved authorizing us to hold the bridge race, so we're just going through that process again. I know they are going to be doing some work on the bridge this year, but we're working through with them through that process, and hopefully everything will work out good this year again.
Sounds good. Anybody have any questions?
Ordered no rain this year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
No lightning.
last year, if you would've just let me go when we were ready, I would've been back in time. So have you considered, like, we couldn't run across the bridge due to the weather, but we could still run on our own. Have you ever considered, an alternate route to stretch it out just in case there's a chance that we could have a weather delay, or would that even be possible?
We have a limited time frame. It wasn't that you couldn't run across the bridge. We couldn't allow people to run at all. It's following the kind of state high school guidelines. If there's lightning in the
Okay.
area that's visible, it's a half-hour delay automatically. And we only have a certain amount of time we can delay to, just for our vendors, for reservation of the port, for blocking off the bridge, that I
Okay.
think we can delay about up to a half hour or 45 minutes, but once that time expires, we're kind of tied to.
Alright, well, I
doing
don't
it.
recommend it, but I went wild man and ran in the rain.
Yeah.
Call points, bet, and place your bets. See how they do.
I didn't get struck by lightning.
All right, next up, we're going to set some dates for public hearings, I believe, yep. First one is consideration for the sale of a property locally known as 1021 North 8th Street, Burlington, Iowa, with conditions. Eric?
Just a vacant lot that we're selling.
Okay. Next one is consideration for sale of property locally known as 704 South Central Avenue.
Same for that.
Same. Number C is consideration for the proposed ordinance amending the chapter 163A.07 of the Burlington, Iowa Code of Ordinances concerning the hearing rights in the case of junk vehicles, April 6, 2020.
Just a minor change for the hearings.
Okay.
The way the notice provisions are listed in the Code of Ordinances doesn't make it clear the process to use on this section. This is provide a little bit of clarification on how that notice provision works.
Okay. D is consideration for an application for housing sustainability grant from the Iowa Economic Development Authority Community Development Block Grant Program, April 6, 2020.
This is kind of a change. Last year, we applied for owner-occupied rehab, and they have kind of a different program through IEDA this year, so we're applying for funds again to rehab some owner-occupied homes
Okay.
in our community.
Any questions, guys?
Would that be administered by Southeast Iowa?
Yeah, yep.
The regional-
And there's no local
regional
match
planning?
required on this anymore,
Okay,
so.
cool. E is consideration for plans and specifications for the 2020 Senior Center Roof Replacement Project. That's April 6, 2020. Anything? No, it's what we've discussed before.
We have it built into the budget for 70,000 for 78 maybe, I don't know, but in that neighborhood, for a roof repair, and we'll be just going out with
Okay.
the plans and specs on that.
F is consideration for plans and specifications from the 2020 West Avenue Gear Avenue Dial Bar Retrofit Project.
And this was one of the CIP projects,
Take care of the
for
bouncing.
the funding, the projects, capital projects we're doing this year. The two major ones were Central and then
The North Hills work, and then this
Yeah.
is a supplementary project.
And this was gonna take out the
This-
hibbity skibbity.
Yeah, hippity skippity. This actually project will involve more than roadway in just Burlington. You'll also see an MOU, memo of understanding with West Burlington, from the boundary line with West Burlington up until Division. So we'll bid this out as one project. There'll be language that you'll see in the coming week for that, so it'll involve more than just that. I don't remember what their portion was, but we'll also be bidding out their work too.
Yeah, okay. G is consideration for plans and specifications for the 2020 Virginia Avenue Sycamore Street stormwater improvements.
So Virginia and Sycamore are up on the north side of town, just due west of Carly Nelson is probably the best way to describe it. There's a lot of drainage issues that come down the hillway, and so that's what this project's gonna take care
Was
of.
this budgeted in this next year's budget?
No, I don't think it was.
So how are you funding
I
that?
think that's a miscellaneous
Out of that?
project.
Okay, and that's April 6, 2020. We'll talk about that. H is consideration for consolidated transit grant application. That's April 20th, 2020.
So this is our funding grant application. We do this on an annual basis to secure the FTA, the Federal Transit, and STA, the State Transit Association monies to fund the operations and then ultimately the capital for the Burlington Urban Service.
And that's ridership driven, a lot of that?
So mileage and ridership go into the funding part of that, and I'll talk about that
Okay.
in my presentation in 30 days.
All right, then 8 is a public, 8A, I guess, public hearings previously scheduled by the city council's consideration of property disposition with Merge LLC, April 6, 2020.
It's a follow-up of the development agreement that we did with Merge for the former PD building, disposing of that property to them as part of that agreement for no dollars.
Okay.
With the stipulations that are associated within the development agreement, the demolition of the two structures and construction of approximately 60, I think it's 56 units of upper story housing and something like 5,400 square foot of commercial space with a minimum assessed value of $5 million on that project.
All right. Any questions on that, guys? Then on discussion items, number 1 has been canceled due to illness, which was the presentation by Impact 7G on Cascade Bridge. And number 2 has also been canceled, which was the citywide cleanup program. Those will both take place at a later date. Number 3, discussion items, healthy neighborhood program.
Have like an hour for this then, or
You have as long as you need.
take a minute or two?
Don't tell him that.
Yeah,
I don't think you have much to worry about with him.
No. Just wanted to update council that we are seeking applications again for the Healthy Neighborhoods Program. This is the 3rd year that we're going through this program. Again, the program's intended to assist neighborhood revitalization efforts and increase positive neighbor-to-neighbor relations. There's no income requirements for applications or funding, so all residential neighborhoods are candidates for this. We do keep the criteria focused on close proximity of neighbors and exterior renovations that are visible from the street. Those are kind of the main goals. We want to see neighborhoods and neighbors working together on projects and on an application. So it's 1 application per neighborhood. So we do kind of seek out a project leader within that neighborhood to submit it all as 1 package. Would like to see some neighbors helping each other out, building those relations that maybe are there or strengthening them, or maybe they aren't there. So also want to see improvements to residences that are visible from the street that kind of improve the appeal within that neighborhood. So again, looking for applications to have 5 more homes in a 1 to 3 block area. The more condensed area, the better, to see a greater impact. Again, exterior work to be completed, so whether it's siding or landscaping, new doors or windows or something that you can tell has made an impact or change on that home. And then just seeing neighbors working well together and positively with each other. We've had some applications where they already meet on a semi-regular basis, and then this has kind of strengthened that, or some that maybe they didn't know their neighbors, but now they have certain skills that they can help trade off some labor or work together on different things just to build those relations a little bit more. So if you go to the city's website and search Healthy Neighborhood Program, there's a page there with an application. Or Jessica Gerling in our office, in the development office, first floor of City Hall, is kind of the lead on this. You can give her a call or email, or just stop in anytime, and she can go through that with you. We are going to try and get these flyers out as much as we can, contact people that maybe applied before and weren't successful, how they can improve their applications. But if anyone knows of any individual or group that is interested in this, certainly have them get a hold of us, and we'd love to work with them and see how we can make a successful application. Last year, we did have 4 different neighborhoods apply with 42 homes. Awards were given to 2 neighborhoods with 18 homes approved for funding. So we do have a certain amount of funding available, and then we have to reserve that amount, whether they spend it or get reimbursed. We want to make sure that's held for them. So we typically can't fund all applications, but we try and work through those that are most competitive and work with the applicants to make them the most competitive they can be. And then it's a 1-to-1 match up to $1,000. So if you spend $1,000 and on your home yourself, you qualify for up to $1,000 match. If you spend $500, you'd qualify for $500, and it's a reimbursement program. So you spend the money up front, show that you've completed it, and then turn those receipts or invoices in and get reimbursed.
It's a brilliant program. I like it. Any questions, anybody? Number 4, appointments. Oh, my screen just went dead. Sorry about that. Yeah, do you have them? Okay. Number 4 is appointments. It looks like the Florence Paterno's term is expiring in city planning, and it is requested that we consider reappointing Florence Paterno to the City Planning Commission. And on Historic Preservation Commission, Kay Weiss's term has expired. Stephanie Brakefield has expressed an interest in serving on this committee, so it's recommended that we consider appointing Stephanie Brakefield to a new 3-year term. That's that. And future discussion items will be parking passes on March 30th, so mark your calendars for that. Is there anything else before the council?
We did want to put up something. We do apologize for, we had figured tonight would take a significant amount of time between Don's issue and Impact 7G's presentation. So we're done fairly quickly tonight as a result of that. Just wanted to make sure that, following up on a presentation from Leo Foley a couple of weeks ago at a work session, my understanding of how that discussion left was in the area just to the right of the auditorium, which is in that blue box down there, that the splash pad was the last thing that he had marked there for locations, for splash pad location, that was where he was proposing, and that he'd had the impression that was where the majority of support was for that. But we wanted to make sure that we're on board on that. And then how parking would work. There's the oblong area in the center is all open green space, but then to the right, his design that they're going to moving forward with has 24 spaces in that red box, half of that green area, that I think is a little bit more in addition to what had been kind of put forward to have at least some parking there. It allows for a concrete space in front of the bandstand, or whatever you call that. Stage. Wanted to make sure that was an appropriate allocation of how spots were going. This is a significant change to that location. He just wants to make sure everyone's on board with that.
Is that additional spaces too, that blue there? Or?
So the blue had been in all the designs, 24 spaces along the west side.
But there was nothing on, the
There
west
was-
side wasn't there, the east side was. The west side didn't come about until we decided to use that space as a result of the rail line going
Yeah,
away.
so,
Correct.
yeah.
So
but
you're
that-
picking up- you're
Most
picking
of
up-
those, I think, were in the designs that he presented to you the other day.
But
But the
not-
ones on the
yeah.
north were not.
So, as the only city councilman, and Jim was involved with this, and Nick was involved with this, the first part of his coming to Burlington, as one of the only guys that sat in this room and a lot of other rooms and helped put this plan together, I guess I have a tremendous amount of respect for the people that did it and the process. And when we did that, we discussed quite in lengthy terms the impact on parking, and we took into consideration the parking study that had been done, and what the focus was and what the demand was for parking on the riverfront. And the dozens of people that were involved in that process determined at that time that given the demand for parking north of the port, parking south of the port, and the parking on the frontage roads there, that it was appropriate, that we didn't absolutely have to have the same amount of parking that we did in between that. So when Leo presented a couple weeks ago, I wasn't able to be here, and I apologize for that, but I would say that when we did it, we put the splash pad where it was originally for several reasons. One, we wanted to make sure that the riverfront was inviting, and it not only inviting from somebody who's standing on the river, but also from somebody who's standing uptown, i.e. Jefferson or Washington. So we viewed the parking turnabout and the greenery and the outdoor space there right in front of the auditorium as an inviting area for those on Jefferson. And we viewed the splash pad as the enticement if you were looking down at the riverfront from Washington. We also put the splash pad where it was because we wanted to activate the space that is the existing stage year-round. And what we felt, and if you look at the original design, there was an appetite for adding shade structures to that space so that people could enjoy the splash pad, parents or whatnot, while their kids played in the splash pad down below. We'll see how many times I have to say that the rest of the night.
You could just say pad, we'll get it.
Okay, all right. And then also, if you look at the east side of the Memorial Auditorium, there are plans, or at least in the drawing that was adopted, we have an outdoor arboretum area with an outdoor auditorium area or a place where we could potentially have outdoor concerts, things like that. But we also put that together and kind of designed it so that it could potentially be a wedding venue. And we moved the splash pad away from that so that you would have this tranquil space that people could use, and they wouldn't have a splash pad with a lot of kids or activity going on right on top of them. Which is why we moved it to the north side of that auditorium space. Now, I'm all for trying to come up with alternative parking, especially in the winter months when we're talking about the splash pad's not even going to be on. Perhaps we shape it or move it in a direction where we can come up with a few extra spots so that we're not creating such a constraint on parking for large events going on at the auditorium in the winter months. I'm optimistic that a hotel could take place downtown. I don't know. We've all sat in those meetings. I don't know if that's going to happen in this spot with the current person, but time will tell. But I would like to see us move forward with the respect to the process that took place over a period of 12 months with the dozens of people that were involved in that process. They put it together the way that they put it together for a reason. If we make adjustments to that, that's great. But I also feel personally that throwing everything into that corner in the auditorium, it just distorts what we're trying to do. It's not activating the entire space. I think we could do better than that. So that's my position. Those are the reasons why we made those decisions back then. And there were a lot of others. Like I said, people were involved from the auditorium. They were involved from Steamboat Days, downtown partners, Jim, the city, Eric, other council members were involved at that time, and the decisions at that time were the ones that put together the plan that's there right now. So
Wasn't this the one that Leo suggested though?
Leo's suggestion is to do the 24 spaces, or at least
I inquired about parking.
yeah,
And so Leah's suggestion is the 24 spaces. Now,
in the
And
blue box.
The last meeting, he presented three different options for
different options,
the
yeah.
possible location of
the
where the
splash
splash pad would go. He wasn't looking at those 24 spaces at
no,
all.
that was just a
But,
concrete area.
but out of the discussion at the rest of the council, Matt, you weren't here, I wasn't here at that meeting. The design that you came up with to move forward with was where he's got the splash pad in this drawing.
See, I guess I agree with you on some of those points, Matt, but by the same token, looking down Jefferson Street and seeing, which is our hub, and seeing the kids at the splash pad, because you would still see them there, which is just as inviting as a parking turnaround area. That's why I like it down there closer to the auditorium, because we may not get the boating infrastructure grant. And the auditorium would indeed typically be manned, and you could have the bathrooms open for people to use them during the weekday. The reason I asked about parking spaces in front of the stage is that Leo's first drawing, when he moved that, is that was an undefined area and it was going to be concrete. I've had people call me and they are concerned about parking there. And the nice thing about parking is I think it doubles up. You can park during the day and use it for at night. So I think a couple things. I discussed it with Leo and he's discussed it. It's really gonna come back down to what the rest of the council wants to do. I do wanna highlight a few things that aren't in this picture, but are in the greater plan, just in case. So when we did the parking study, and granted, it was done 6 or 7 years ago, Jim, give or take? So.
4 to 5.
So some of the information may be a little irrelevant, but I can't imagine that it's significantly off than what it is today. We haven't added that many jobs or that much. We're gonna add a lot of housing. That much, well, correct, but likely those people aren't gonna park on the riverfront. We haven't added that much space, commercial space or demand on the riverfront portion. The couple of the numbers that stood out to me was the North Riverfront Park, the percentage of time, it was occupied less than 17% during high peak hours on the riverfront. So that parking lot's not even close to being predominantly occupied or full. And the one south of the Memorial Auditorium was less than 40%. On top of that, with the redesign of the parking lots on the south side of the auditorium, we're adding almost 40 spaces to that when all the construction is done, when the garage is gone, when everything is done and everything's restriped the way it's supposed to be, we're adding a number of spaces. And that doesn't even include the fact that with the rail going away, there's the potential there to add all of those spaces along the corridor on the east side, which was parking that wasn't even taken into consideration when we came up with this plan originally. That's more or less a bonus on top of what we talked about before. When we talk about taking away parking spots, if you add up all the spots that were taken away and then you add them all back in after we've redesigned everything, we're really not losing that much parking. Now, you may have to park another 50 yards in either direction, and that may be good or bad for depending on who you talk to, who works on the riverfront. But we're really not taking away those spaces. And again, I'm all for doing something with that splash pad that would allow us to use a lot of that space in the winter months, if we can do that. But I am not for taking it and shoving it next to the auditorium and next to that outdoor arboretum space. Those are things that, when we did it, we talked to the community, we had a number of public opportunities where people would come in, tell us what they liked, tell us what they didn't like. A lot of people loved the splash pad, and a lot of people really loved.
People didn't want it though, too.
True.
A lot of people didn't want it.
And a lot of people loved the outdoor quiet spaces that we created there on the east side of the auditorium. They loved the potential opportunity that has for us to activate that space.
So you think the splash pad should be kind of where the little green, the red.
Where the 24 spaces are, that green box, I'd like to see us move it back over there. Now, like I said, if we reposition it in a way where in the winter months, when it's not being used, we can add some type of parking in there or some space to be able to add the parking, I'm all for that.
Yeah, I don't think.
Now,
we can
where-
park on
Just,
On that map, where was the public restrooms? I'm not real big
the
on them
public
running into the
restrooms are
Memorial
on the east,
Auditorium.
they're on the east side of the port, south of,
Further this way?
on the south end of the east side of the port. And keep in mind, though, those are only going to be there assuming we get the boating infrastructure grant, because they're part of that grant process.
Because I was for the splash pad being closer to the public restroom.
Which is where, and that was another thing that we took into consideration when we did this. You're gonna have plumbing there, and having the access for people.
Certainly don't want wet, soggy kids running all over.
Right,
Memorial
and this
Auditorium.
is where, in that green space, I can only guess here, but it's probably 50 yards, or 25 yards from that space, not far.
Okay.
And moving it all the way to the auditorium, you would be adding to that distance, so. Anyways, I'm where I'm at. I just wanted you guys to understand the context of what the group had when they put the plan together, and I wasn't
Yeah,
here.
and
then.
I understand about the parking. It's really not diminished, because that's the number one question I get, is what's gonna happen to the parking. And people get heartburn all over it already, and I
Yep.
reassure them, we're not gonna have, a huge deficit of parking. I mean,
if
it's
when-
basically a wash.
If when we did this, the study had shown that every single parking stall on the riverfront was occupied 100% of peak hours, we would have had a different plan. But that wasn't the case. It wasn't even close to the case. So,
Well, I'm probably different than all of you, and I wasn't in all the discussions, but I'm kind of thinking, I would like to see the whole thing parking. Put the 44 spaces, the 24 spaces, I think the green area is all nice and everything, but it's functionality, it's upkeep, maintenance, and everything like that. I think that's a problem. I think it's an ongoing cost. I've heard the thing about the splash pad. I guess we'll see if it's used or not. But that's my personal opinion. I think it needs to be over by the auditorium, because if we don't get the grant to put the bathrooms over there, then they have to use the auditorium bathrooms, correct?
Those aren't public bathrooms, so they wouldn't have access to that building.
But they could be.
Well, they can hit the handicap button and go in the auditorium. Anybody can go in the auditorium.
Don't know that I would want to promote that, but
If you
it's
have-
possible.
Yep. It's better than them peeing on the splash pad. Because that's what's gonna happen. Anyway,
I don't know that my 5-year-old's gonna worry about that.
I just think our riverfront's our biggest investment, and people don't come to a riverfront for
Yeah.
a parking lot.
And I agree, I think for me, and I've said this many a times, that is the one piece of real estate in this city that we can't replicate. There's only gonna be so much real estate along a river. Most communities don't have that. So while parking is important, I think development and doing what we're doing down there and continuing to do that is just as important.
I would say that it is underutilized. I mean, we are using prime real estate for parking. I wasn't really sold on the splash pad idea originally, but my wife takes the kids over to Stronghurst and uses theirs, and she says it's packed all the time, and people are going there just for the splash pad, so I think it's a draw. I kind of like it where it's at, but if it was moved, I could live with that. And if we're gonna use that for events and you're gonna have outdoor music too, I think this is a perfect spot to have it happen. And I don't think we're gonna lose too much parking, so the parking's not really a concern for me. I do like the idea of the amphitheater or whatever down there, in the corner too, so. Yeah, I don't really have a dog in the fight. I think that either way, however we set it up, if, it would be nice to have some bathrooms though, if it's gonna be on the other side.
I was just in Clinton, Iowa last week for work, and I was eavesdropping on some people at a table next door to me, and the gentleman was saying, when I think of top places to visit in southeast Iowa, Clinton is not on the top of my list, because if you visit there, it's basically just a river that's undeveloped. And I thought, oh, he could be talking about Burlington, Iowa. When people think of Burlington, we want them to think of all the amenities and all the fun that they can have. So I do think it behooves us to build the riverfront up. And so when people think of a destination place on southeast Iowa's Mississippi River, they think of Burlington.
Oh, if we have the river, the cruises too, if we had the Viking cruises and the Queen, what better spot to have them step into Burlington than to have this beautiful space that's gonna be their first impression, is stepping off the boat and looking at all that cool stuff, so.
And I think, again, just going back to the point, the issue was raised back then was if you put the splash pad next to the outdoor amphitheater, trying to have either a wedding or a concert with the splash pad in near proximity was gonna create a problem because of the competing noises. Kids are gonna scream, they're gonna yell, they're gonna laugh, they're gonna do what kids do. As a parent, with little kids, I can't take them to the park without that happening. So I think that was one of the reasons why we did provide some separation between the two. And maybe Jim has more to add, because you were in most of those meetings.
we just need to give Vinstra and Kim some instruction, or Leo. I did ask about the parking in front of the stage because of the last drawing where we showed moving the splash pad down on the south end there. That was an undefined area, and my frame of thinking is that park there during the day and use it for other things at night if the stage is being used. My concern is I don't think you can, after talking to Leo, I don't think you can design a splash pad that they can drive on.
He was gonna do some research this week and figure out if that was possible.
I think that could be a huge concern as far as maintenance down the road, so
Well, what if a car's leaking oil or any other?
Well,
thing,
that's,
Those are some of the things that he was gonna review.
yeah,
But
so,
again, if we reposition the splash pad, and one of the things that I'll say is in the drawing, the splash pad is more centrally located in front of the stage. even if you were to do that today, there would still be the potential for some of that parking.
Well,
Not
yeah.
24 spaces, but some of it.
The other way to look at that though too is if we do and decide the developer knocks our socks off and decides he wants to put the hotel in the middle and we agree to it, you don't have to move the splash pad under this design. The other one, you would have to move it. You're gonna have to, it's gonna be too tight to have a splash pad next to a hotel. So I like the splash pad in this drawing. To me, the issue is, do we want to put parking in that undefined space, or do we just want it to be a concrete plaza area? But that's why we're bringing it up to here, because we as council need to give some direction to Leo so he can get it applied for and get the drawing set. And that date's coming up. It's April 6th, 7th.
Final plan, not final plans, but it's
Final.
pretty.
There's a
it's-
set of check plans that's
Okay.
due.
April
in-
5th
Yeah.
is the date you gave me.
And so the one thing
Yeah.
to consider when thinking about the location of the splash pad is also the underground infrastructure and where that would cross. I think from a design standpoint, if it were to shift one way or the other, the sewer part of that would have a little bit of trick on where they put that.
When we did the work that we did year before last, was the infrastructure put in place to support the splash pad in either location?
It doesn't have anything to do with it, it's all stormwater. This
Well,
would be
but-
sanitary water and water, but there's water in the area.
Right.
The biggest would be sanitary and tying that into either the port's infrastructure or the auditoriums in some fashion.
Okay.
But the lines that run along the flood wall are all stormwater pumping, and those go to the stormwater wet well and then get taken over the wall. So that would the splash pad infrastructure would have to go and tie into a sanitary lateral, which locations are, I don't know the ports very well, but the auditorium would have to come around the south side of that.
If we moved it, let's say we kept it in the same type of parallel to the existing parking lot today that's on this plan currently, but shifted it more to the north, but didn't take it to the west, would we still be able to potentially have the same layout? It would encroach a little bit on the greenery space that's just been added to it.
So you're saying flop the shade structure in the splash?
Well,
Thinking.
where's the shade structure? Is that the one?
That's the
Right.
orange.
Yeah, so if you just put a fixed line on the north side of that orange piece and just swapped it, could we pull the could we pull the splash pad out of there? You would take it, it would be almost the same distance to the river.
Infrastructure wise, yes, you could do that.
And I'm going to assume we're gonna get the boating infrastructure grant. Obviously, we can assume a lot of things. I'm gonna make that assumption. Would it fall in line better with the outdoor shower houses? From a plumbing, you'd be able to do a lot of that lateral work and things like that at the same time?
You probably could tie that together, but you may also tie the indoor plumbing of the port to the underground at the port. That's
Okay.
already existing. So I wouldn't say that.
And then you could keep a lot of your parking, which I know is a primary concern for a lot of people. And then we could still pull it away from that space.
I mean, you could possibly, we could ask Leo, you could possibly move that, flip those two things around and maybe change that green space a little bit.
Just pull it a little bit more to the
And
west.
and like I said, the 24 spaces on parking, it could be decorative enough that we could use it for other things. But I would like this to see, if we're looking at 56 apartments at the merge facility, that's a block and a half from downtown. And there is no real parking designated for that building. I think it's gonna be important to have some spots there. So I'm willing to look at doing that, Matt. That would give you a little bit more of a space for quiet, if it can be done, as far as flipping those two and maybe changing changing the shape and size of the green space.
Then you're keeping your sight line with Washington Street, pulling it away from that other activated space.
Yeah. Well, the side of line in front of Jefferson, to be honest with you, if you stand and look down, if it's just a turnaround area, you're not gonna see anything there either.
Well, I think once the landscaping's done that was in the original plan, it's gonna have a completely different sight line.
From a block and a half, I don't know, but you had this shade structure there, you would have something to look at. So, I don't know, it's up to you guys what you wanna do, but I would like to see us try to retain especially, and it came up because it wasn't identified. And I've had a lot of people call me about parking concerns. They have a concern about it. So it's up, but we need to give them some direction, give Leo some direction so they can make some definitive plans. So now's the time to weigh in, people, on this, so.
So with where it's at now and being off the corner, like, isn't that, the area you're talking about down there, isn't it actually just it's not gonna be right on top of it?
The outdoor auditorium space and the arboretum space are directly connected to the cantilever deck that will exist there. That all comes in with the dockage, because that cantilever deck actually connects to the dockage.
He's shown this as the stage.
Correct. But and what's not on here is essentially the landscaping portion of this, but it feeds in more to the north and well, I guess it's kind of on there. No, over to my right,
I
I
think you
guess.
move the stage from there, so it'd have to be around the stage.
I'm gonna jump over. So this space here, there's an outdoor landscaping area that we used, or we highlighted as a potential wedding style pavilion where people could have events like that. The outdoor stage is here, but the landscaped area kind of a reflection of what could be like Shakespeare's garden, that kind of style, but it was a lot of flower and trees and different spaces.
That's already existing. That's already there, a seat wall.
So,
Yeah, seat
Would be
walls
up
there.
in here.
okay. Yeah, this space here. If we had the copy of the old plan.
Well, what do you think?
Obviously, there's gonna be more discussion.
No, we need to make some, we need to make a decision, quit bouncing around on it, so.
This is all a decision that's up to you as the policymakers. That's the fun thing. You had, I mean, the group, and you, Matt, you weren't here last time, which is unfortunate for that decision, but they did bring 3 different options for you to look at. And they did that with the purpose of doing a lot of the design work that they've worked on over the course of the last month. With the splash pad there, you're gonna have a lot of infrastructure changes that are gonna go on with it. So if you're wanting to have the change, you gotta wanna have the change. If you have a default because you don't know what you wanna do, when it comes to that part, I would suggest that you leave it where it's at. However, if you are passionate the way Matt is on this to have it done the other way, I mean, that's certainly fine. They'll work with us on it, but they are running out of time to make engineering changes.
Yeah, that's where that discussion came up from, is because I asked about that concrete area north of the central green, and that was just kind of a area. So that's why I thought we could put some parking there, but we need to, when this was presented, they were talking about putting the splash pad in front of the auditorium,
Right.
where that parking turnaround was, or on the north side of that, or down in the area. We as a group thought that area should be where it's at now. And then they moved the shade structure in that drawing to the
From
east
the-
side, right?
Yeah, from the.
So, we need to kind of vote and decide what we're going to do on that. Unless there's an alternate proposal that we could try to screen past Leo and get some design work done on. But I personally, where I'm at, I like what's there now. I think that's a compromise for the people that didn't want the splash pad, but the people want to retain some parking. So the people want the splash pad are still gonna get it. But the people that are griping about parking would have an opportunity there for an area in front of the north stage. That concrete area, from my mind, could be useful when you had an event on the stage, versus being on grass. So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
I think we kind of did agree to this, and that was what he was leaning towards too,
Right.
the developer, or construction. Yeah, I think that the way the pieces all fit together, it just is about as good as you can get. And I think that this is still gonna work for the weddings and that. I like it the way it is.
Talk about that.
So, real quick, I'm just showing this, and I did just email this to you, and the only reason is because some of you may never have seen it, but this is the 3D model of the plan that was put together, which will provide perspective as to what I'm talking about here. It's hard to imagine things, I guess.
Pavement there.
But we would essentially move it into this space versus out where it was. There's the shade structures on top of the stage. Here's the bathroom. This is the existing work that's already done.
I like it closer to the bathroom. That's my vote.
One of the things that I want to highlight here is what that space is supposed to look like with what the adopted plan was before, which it'll get to here in a minute. And I think this plan's available online, or this video is available online, so.
I don't know if it's posted on the website. That flyover video?
There's the shade structures, this is the dock. And to put the dock into perspective, the dock is 20 foot wide, 300 foot long.
Looks nice.
Yeah, it's gonna look great no matter what.
This, one thing with the splash pad, we had some discussion about how long is that water gonna be on and what's the flexibility of having it turned off?
But there was a question raised to me about what operational costs come associated with the splash pad. And so I called around to, the one that I got direct contact that gave me good information was Grinnell. They just installed a new splash pad in their park. And the first year, they said they just kind of let it go from 9 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. And they said, the next year we learned and we shut down our terms of operation because they went through millions of gallons of water. And so you're gonna have some programming capabilities in there. I talked to Leo about having some occupancy sensors or like a push button. So like if they're there, they push it and it lasts for 15 minutes and then it shuts off. So you could shut it off if you have function in that staged area just immediately east of the auditorium. You could shut it off. You could have a valve and you could turn the operations of it off to create that separation.
Can you
of
recycle
function.
the water, or that's not?
Well, that's part of the conversation is we've looked towards more of the
That's the
pumping and
site
then
plan.
dropping it into our sanitary
To do
sewer.
weddings.
Because
It's
the
just over
recycle
here.
Yeah,
ones
it's the recycle
essentially
one.
puts you into the category of
the outdoor
operating
auditoriums.
outdoor pool, essentially.
See, I would-
Because that
This is the
recycling,
turn. This is parking here as well.
that system is much more expensive to
he
operate
talked
than
about
just
that.
the pump and dump type methodology.
It
You
just
go
sounds
through a
more
lot
environmentally friendly, though, than wasting all that water.
I get it.
That's my
I-
take on it.
Well, my concern about the dual use of the splash pad area is, sorry, my wife wears sandals and high heels, and so if you're gonna try to walk on that, when we had the grates there before from the fountain, you know, when you would have an event down in front of the auditorium, you had to make sure to kind of block that off, that people didn't step on it, because you could step through that grate and you can get hurt.
And they're
Not-
fiberglass too.
Yeah,
and
not
so they have
stepping through the grate,
shards.
but it's wide, and so the heel would fall in, and you'd see twisted ankles and see people get hurt. And so I don't know if that splash pad will ever be a dual function type unit, what we were talking about in front of the stage. So that's why I agreed to the down there, it's specific, it's right by the auditorium. That's where I'm at, guys, you know, but I'm one of five, we need to decide how we're gonna proceed on it, so. I do like the shut-off deal, though, because it's gonna have to have some kind of push-button shut-off, otherwise, It's no sense with it running when people aren't there. So,
I see that part of it both ways. I think it would be extremely attractive as a water feature in the summer hours with different lights glowing on it, things like that. Much like what we have in Crapo Park, but it depends on the cost.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be a big driver as to whether or not that's practical.
yeah.
Anyways, I did that flyby just so you guys have a point of reference.
Okay, so what do we think? Where we at? Know where Matt's at? Robert?
I like it the way it is.
Linda?
I like it closer to the restroom.
The proposed restaurant.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of for visitors. I'm thinking of somebody with 2 or 3 toddlers, let's make it easy for them.
That's assuming we get the grant and get the
I'm
restrooms.
assuming we get the grant in the restrooms.
Bill? So it's 3-2 then.
I don't know that there's a right or wrong. I mean,
I know, that's the tough thing
there's
about it.
preferences, so
Yeah, there's
it's
preferences,
just how
it's
you
not-
work with it.
Because for all of us that say, well, we want to do this, we have those in the community that are like, I don't want the,
This,
and we've heard them, that I don't want the splash pad.
This shade
You know,
structure is
some
supposed
do.
to be something attractive, right? It's supposed to be something that's
Yeah.
architecturally attractive. So,
The shade structure is in that plan.
so if swapping the position of the shade structure and the splash pad right there would kind of be the in between, which would pull it away from the area down there, and then I don't know. I do like it the way it is, but. I like it the way it is.
Leo's gonna shoot us.
I tell you what, I haven't
He
had,
did all this
I
work.
haven't had a single person that has a child, say that they don't want the splash
Oh, I
pad.
know.
I have had a lot of people who don't have children
That don't.
that know it. And you
Yeah.
know what, 30 years from now, I'm probably not gonna be a fan of it as much as I am today, but as a guy with small kids.
Yep, I get
want
it.
I want something that attracts that family makeup to the riverfront. We
Yeah.
don't have much down there right now.
Well,
So,
I get it, man. I understand what I got nieces and nephews and,
yeah.
and, I can see the
If
point of
people are
it.
driving to Stronghurst to use their splash pad and it's completely full and there's just kids everywhere, those people don't all live in Stronghurst.
No.
Then it's just making sure that they're comfortable and
Yeah.
even like what Linda said, making sure it's close to
But
the bathrooms makes
i-
that practical.
if the
I
stick-
wouldn't want to rely on them to be able to use the auditorium's bathrooms to do that. I don't want people running in there with wet clothes. That'll
But,
even make
okay,
Nick's
so-
job even more difficult. And
The
Ac-
sticking point there
access
is
is gonna be
if
a
you don't
problem.
get the grant, then you're gonna have a problem.
You know,
So-
maybe BRE
True.
wants to run some concessions in there.
I doubt that.
So is,
throwing
let's,
that out there.
let's kind of narrow this down. So is flip-flopping the splash pad and the shade structure, is that an agreeable compromise? It gets you closer, or you definitely want it in front of the stage?
I'd like to see it moved as far north as we'd be willing to do that.
But if we flip those two around,
Yes.
you're just not gonna have your sight line maybe necessarily that you're looking for. But you would still be an indication of something downtown. If we flip those around and asked him to change that green space a little bit.
That would be fine. That would be a better than
And
what
we
we've
can
got
still
today.
retain some of that parking, which takes care of that people in front of the stage. Is
And
that
if that shade structure is as cool as I think it's gonna be in my head, that's where they get off the boat anyways, right? And they walk right under that shade structure instead of through a splash pad,
Kind of.
maybe?
The connection points in the existing plan was actually further south and further north, but that could change. It's changed on that plan.
Okay.
I'd put it under the potential hotel at that point. wouldn't
That's
it?
true, it'd be back in the hotel thing, but, hotel thing.
See, I'm where we're at right now, cause I'm not saying that I'm for or against a hotel, but I'm saying if we're considering the possibility in the future of developing that space and fully utilizing it, and we might let a developer have that area, then if we wanna keep the splash pad, that'd have to be where it's at. And I want a splash pad. My wife wants a
Okay,
splash
all
pad,
right.
so I want one too.
I'm with you.
Mama's happy and.
That's probably a good choice on
Yeah, I think I'm solid on that one.
Well, I'm not gonna say that about the hotel, but I don't have any real great fear that we would have to relocate the splash pad if we put it north.
Right.
But that's up to you
I
guys.
think we'd have the ability to, whatever direction we go, I think we're gonna have the ability to work with a potential hotel developer to make the splash pad work as wherever we put it, regardless of it.
Well, the trade-off would be asking Leo to, one more time, go to the wagon and flip-flop those two and change that space. If that's a compromise that we're willing to look at, or where we're at now, it's 3-2 versus, with that plan versus the original. Let me hear you.
I can compromise with the flip.
At least we could have him look at it, if that would be,
Yeah, again, swapping that out, I think, it creates separation between
Okay.
two active spaces. We don't want them right on top of each other. That's what we've got right now, so.
would you be all right with that, Bill?
Yeah.
Robert?
I could live with that.
Okay, so I guess I'll call Leo tomorrow.
I can go in right now, it'd be thrilled.
Leo, are you watching?
All right, I'll call Leo and, let's have him look at that one more time. We're all in agreement, if he can pull that drawing off and get that done, that's where we're at, correct? Yeah, okay. Nick, you got anything to comment? I hear you chattering back there, you got some comment on that? Because now's the time to get it out.
I think the way that they have the splash pad and then that shade structure seems very linear. It would be nice, in my opinion, if they provided some pictures of what splash pads could look like with the shade structures that they're talking about. That might give you some perspective on how you make your decision, but I don't. That's
A little late
It's a
for
little
that,
late
yeah.
for that, but
But it is kind of
Good thought,
linear where it's at, but they could change the green space too. They could make it a little longer, fill up more where the 42 space is, and take away from the south end and move.
all I gotta say is architects, there is something to their grand scheme of design.
Yeah, I
And so
suppose.
normal people can't understand it.
And this is what he was
They get
leaning
it.
towards originally, like when he talked to us, he said this is the one that they had picked
Yeah,
as
I'll-
architects.
I mean, the central green, we're not changing. The 24 spaces is what we're potentially.
Well, no,
keeping.
but you could change the shape of it a little bit is what I mean, so. I'll call Leo tomorrow and I'll take that, since I was the one that brought that up, so. All right, is there anything else before the work session?
No, but I did want to comment on the bridge run. If you're listening in and you've never been on the bridge run, it's a blast. And you don't have to be able to run, you can walk, and you're getting to take a tour of downtown Burlington, and you're getting to go across the bridge on foot, which will normally get you arrested, right? Yeah, depending on the day, so, it's a neat experience, and if you're, walking across it and you look straight up at the supports and the wires, it's kind of, it's an experience, so it's well worth it.
It's your one time to cross it legally, because my wife was training for the bridge run and they stopped her one day. So, what are you doing? Well, I'm training for the bridge run. You can't run across the bridge, ma'am. Get your rear end back to the Iowa side. So, council talk, I think Matt and Bill agreed to
I'm on
do
it.
it tomorrow, 9 o'clock.
Tomorrow? Try
Or Wednesday, 9 o'clock. It just seems like tomorrow.
Don't give a day away.
All right. Anything else? Last run, you got anything, Bill, Linda, Matt, Robert, Jim? No?
6 o'clock. It's a good thing we didn't have those other things.
Yeah, well, that last one took a half hour. Chief, you got anything? No. Rhonda, I saw you slip in. No? Nick, we've heard enough from you.
Go check out some books, people. They got movies too and games.
All right.